Quentin Vale didn't have the $50, but he shoved it into the meter anyway. He was already late picking up his 6-year-old son, Zeke, from school, and the last thing he needed was to be towed. The car parked in front of him, a little silver coupe with a bright orange ticket fluttering under the windshield wiper, caught his eye. A woman's voice echoed in his head, panicked, frustrated, and nearly in tears. "I was just running in to drop off a client form," he'd overheard her say 10 minutes earlier outside the courthouse. "Can you just give me 5 minutes?" The officer hadn't cared. Now she was gone, and the ticket remained. Quentin looked down at the crumpled bills in his hands, his last cash for the week, and then back at the bright yellow sticker. He didn't know why he did it. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be stretched so thin you could feel yourself unraveling. He peeled the ticket off, paid it at the kiosk, and left the receipt tucked gently into the corner of her windshield. Then he bolted. He had a kid to pick up and a shift to start at the diner. Mara Ellis stared at the receipt on her windshield, heart pounding. Her first reaction had been confusion, then disbelief, then something warm bloomed in her chest. "Paid," she whispered. There was no note, no name, just the timestamp and the amount. $50 she didn't have to spare, and someone had paid it for her. She walked back to her car in a daze, gripping the receipt like it was the most valuable thing she owned. Who would do that? She remembered the man from earlier, tall, messy dark hair, frayed hoodie, arms full of books, and a to-go coffee. He'd held the door open for her, nodded when she'd thanked him. There'd been something tired but kind in his eyes. Was it him? She'd been too flustered to notice much else, but something told her it was. And she wasn't going to forget that face. Quentin barely made it to Zeke's school on time. His son came flying out the doors, arms open, backpack slipping off his shoulders. "Dad." "Hey, buddy." Quentin crouched down and caught him in a hug. "Sorry I'm late." Zeke grinned. "You're only 4 minutes late. I counted." Quentin kissed the top of his son's curly brown hair. "Thanks for keeping track." They walked back to the car, Zeke chattering about spelling tests and lunch trades. Quentin nodded along, but his mind kept drifting to the woman with the parking ticket. He didn't even know her name. 3 days later, Mara walked into the diner on East 5th with a mission. She'd asked the courthouse clerk, sweet-talked the security guard, even checked the parking kiosk logs. Nothing had her name on it, but she was completely sure that the man who paid her ticket worked nearby. She spotted him before she even reached the counter. There he was, same hoodie, same tired eyes, same soft smile as he balanced a tray of pancakes and coffee for an elderly couple. Her heart kicked up. Mara slid into the booth by the window and waited. A few minutes later, he approached with a notepad and pen. "Hi, welcome to," he paused, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Have we met?" "You paid my parking ticket." Quentin blinked. "I don't know what you're talking about." Mara reached into her purse and pulled out the receipt. She slid it across the table. "You were at the courthouse, you saw me, and you paid this." He looked like he wanted to deny it again, but then his shoulders dropped. "You weren't supposed to know." "Why?" He glanced over at Zeke, who was sitting at the counter, coloring quietly with a cup of crayons and a kid's menu. "Because I don't do things to be thanked." Mara smiled, heart twisting. "Too bad. I came to thank you anyway." He looked at her like he didn't know what to say. So she helped him out. "I'm Mara." "Quentin," he hesitated, then added, "That's my son Zeke." She nodded softly. "You're a good dad." He gave a short laugh. "I'm trying." "Let me buy you coffee." He blinked again. "I work here." "Then let me leave you a huge tip." He shook his head, but he was smiling now. Not the tired, forced kind, a real one. All right, 1 coffee, but you sit at my table and I'm not letting you pay. Mara grinned. Deal. He brought her coffee, then sat across from her during his break. They talked for 20 minutes, then 30, then an hour. He told her about working double shifts, about raising Zeke alone after his ex left when the boy was 2, about his dream of becoming a teacher. She told him about her freelance design work, her move from Chicago, how she'd been trying to start over after a bad breakup and a business that nearly bankrupted her. They laughed, they listened, they didn't want it to end. I should go, Mara finally said, glancing at the time. Yeah, me too, Quentin said, standing. She looked at him, heart pounding again. Can I see you again? Quentin hesitated. You sure you want to? She stepped closer. You paid for a stranger's parking ticket. Yeah, I want to. He smiled. All right, tomorrow. Tomorrow. Zeke was watching from the counter, eyes wide. Dad, he said as Quentin walked over, do you like her? Quentin looked back at Mara, who was walking out the door, turning for one last smile. Yeah, he said quietly, I think I do. Zeke grinned. Cool, maybe she could be my new mom. Quentin choked on his coffee. Easy, buddy. But the thought didn't sound so crazy anymore. The second time Mara saw Quentin, he had flour dust on his shirt and a tray of cinnamon rolls balanced on his arm. The diner was packed, and he didn't notice her at first not until she waved him down from the corner booth near the jukebox. I brought something, she said as he approached, lifting a small paper bag from the seat beside her. Quentin raised an eyebrow. A bribe. A thank you, she corrected. Don't worry, it's not cash. I figured if I can't tip you, I can at least feed you. He glanced over his shoulder, then set the tray down on the pass-through to the kitchen. What is it? Empanadas, she said. My neighbor's Cuban. She taught me how to make them last year. I tried not to burn them. He sat down across from her, wiping his hands on a towel tucked into his waistband. I'm not above bribery if it tastes like this. There was a pause, and then she added, I went by that meter again. Same time, same day, you weren't there. I switched shifts, he said. Needed mornings free for Zeke's reading class. She nodded slowly, folding the bag closed again. You're always adjusting for him. Quentin leaned back, arms crossed over his chest. There's no fallback plan. It's me or nothing. Mara traced the edge of her coffee mug. Do you ever get tired? He laughed once quietly. Every day. But you keep going. He didn't answer right away. Because I have to. She looked at him, really looked, and he didn't flinch under her gaze. I think that's the bravest thing I've ever heard. He cleared his throat, uncomfortable under the sudden weight of her words. What about you? How's work? Depends on the day, she said. I've been pitching to some new clients. Nonprofits mostly, less money, but the work feels better. Sounds like you're after purpose, not profit. I've done profit before. It didn't go well. He nodded once, then tilted his head. You ever think about leaving the city? She blinked, not really. Why? Just, sometimes I wonder if Zeke would be better off somewhere quieter. Fewer sirens, more trees. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's a stupid thought. No, she said, it's not. He checked the clock on the wall. I've got 10 minutes. Want to help me refill coffees? She blinked. You're asking me to wait tables. Just one. Table 7 drinks like it's a sport. She followed him anyway, laughing. After they cleared the table, he handed her a fresh cup and nodded toward the booth she'd claimed. You can stay as long as you want, he said. I've got another hour, but if you're still here when I'm off, I'll walk you home. You think can't handle a walk alone. I think I'd like to. She studied him for a beat, then said, all right. By the time he hung up his apron and called Zeke over from the corner, Mara was still there, sketching on a napkin with a borrowed pen. Ready? He asked. Lead the way. Zeke held Quentin's hand on one side and grabbed Mara's on the other without hesitation. She looked down at him, surprised, but he just grinned up at her. Do you like cartoons? He asked. Some, she said, amused. Dad can't draw, not even a stick figure. Hey, Quentin said, I can draw a mean dinosaur. Only if it's sleeping, Zeke countered. They turned onto a quieter street, the bustle fading behind them. The sidewalks were cracked, and the streetlights flickered, but Mara liked the rhythm of their walk, Zeke's boundless energy, Quentin's steady presence beside her. So, she said as they reached her apartment building, next time, I bring dessert. I don't say no to dessert. Good, because I make a mean guava tart. Zeke's eyes lit up, with whipped cream. The real kind. Quentin looked at her for a moment, something unreadable in his expression. You're not like anyone I've met. Is that a compliment? It's a warning. She stepped back toward her door. I don't scare easy. He looked like he might say something else, but Zeke tugged his arm. Dad, my shoelace. Quentin knelt without hesitation. When he looked up again, Mara was already at the door, holding it open. Tomorrow, she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then yes, tomorrow. Mara closed the door behind her, leaned against it, and exhaled slowly. She wasn't sure what this was becoming. But she knew she wasn't done with him yet. The first time Mara stepped into Quentin's apartment, she paused just inside the door, eyes taking in the worn couch, the overflowing bookshelf balanced on cinder blocks, and the paper airplanes taped to the wall over a small dining table. Zeke darted past her, kicking off his sneakers. It's not fancy, Quentin said, rubbing the back of his neck, but it's ours. She looked at him. It's warm, I like it. He gestured toward the kitchen. You still up for cooking? Always, she held up a canvas bag. I brought plantains, queso blanco, and enough butter to make your arteries cry. Zeke clapped. Yes. Quentin raised an eyebrow. You're trying to win him over. I'm shameless. They worked side by side, elbows brushing as they moved around the tiny kitchen. Mara peeled, sliced, and fried while Quentin grated cheese and kept Zeke from sneaking bites. You ever want more? She asked, flicking oil from her fingers. Quentin looked over. More what? Space, time, a break. He leaned against the counter. I used to think about it, now I just think about tomorrow. You don't get to dream. I don't have the luxury. She flipped the food onto a plate. That's a lie. He blinked. You could dream right now if you let yourself. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to call Zeke to the table. They ate with the TV playing quietly in the background. Zeke talked nonstop between bites, and Quentin listened with quiet focus, occasionally refilling his son's water or dabbing ketchup off his cheek. After dinner, Zeke pulled out a shoebox filled with crayons and drawings, laying them out across the floor. Mara crouched beside him, studying each sketch. This one's a volcano, he said. She pointed, and this. That's me and Dad, we're on the moon. Ambitious. Quentin joined them, sitting cross-legged on the floor. He wants to build rockets now. No, Zeke corrected. I want to build rocket schools. Mara laughed. That's even better. Later, after Zeke had fallen asleep on the couch mid-cartoon, Quentin draped a blanket over him and lowered the volume. Mara stood by the window, looking out at the street below. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if things had gone differently?" she asked. He joined her, arms folded. "I thought I'd be a professor, had a scholarship lined up, but then," he paused. "Plans changed." She didn't press. "Instead," she said, "I was supposed to open a design studio in Milan. Got a lease, a partner, the whole thing. But he ran off with the money before we even opened the doors." He looked over, eyes narrowing slightly. "You got burned." "Torched." Quentin was quiet for a moment. "You think you'll ever try again?" She shrugged. "Maybe, if I find someone I trust." She turned to face him. "What are you afraid of most?" He didn't hesitate, letting Zeke down. Mara stepped closer. "You won't." "You don't know that." "I do." He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing something shift between them. She could feel it to the air thick with the weight of whatever was coming next. "You're different," he said quietly. "I've been told." He stepped back, breaking the tension. "I should get him to bed." She nodded. "I'll head out." He walked her to the door. She paused before opening it. "I meant what I said. You're not alone in this." "I don't know how to let someone in," he admitted. "Start small." He opened the door. "You're not going to run, are you?" "No," she said. "I'm here." He watched her go, the door closing slowly behind her. Inside, the apartment was dim, the only light coming from the TV screen, still casting shadows across the sleeping boy. Quentin sat on the edge of the couch, stared at the drawings scattered on the floor, and whispered to himself, "Start small." He didn't know where this was going. But for the first time in a long time, he wanted to find out. The morning sun filtered through the diner windows, casting golden light across the linoleum floors. Quentin stood behind the register, counting out the till with half his mind elsewhere. A soft knock on the counter pulled him back. Mara stood there, holding a large envelope. "You open early," she said, offering a crooked smile. "Figured I'd catch you before the rush." He wiped his hands on a towel. "You always bring something when you show up. Should I be nervous?" "Only if you hate surprises." She handed over the envelope. Quentin opened it slowly, brows drawing together as he scanned the first page. "This is a scholarship application," he said, voice low. "It's a full grant, for working parents going back for education degrees. You qualify." He looked up. "How did you even?" "I asked around. One of my clients is on the board. All you need is a letter of intent and a few hours a week. The rest is covered." "I can't," he exhaled. "I can't ask you to do this." "You didn't ask," she said. "I wanted to. You told me once that you couldn't afford to dream. I disagree." He was quiet for a long time. "Zeke's reading class ends next month," he finally said. "I'd have mornings." She nodded. "It's enough, and can help with pickup if you ever need. I don't have a 9 to 5. "You're serious about this?" "I'm serious about you." He stared at the application, as if unsure whether to hold it or hand it back. "I don't know how to accept things like this," he admitted. "Then learn," her voice softened. "You've given so much without expecting anything. Let someone return the favor." He blinked fast and tucked the envelope under the counter. "I'll look it over tonight." "You'll do more than that," she said. "You'll send it in." A small laugh escaped him, caught somewhere between disbelief and awe. Later that night, Quentin sat on the couch, Zeke asleep beside him, the envelope spread open on the coffee table. He read through each page twice, then reached for a pen. When he signed his name at the bottom, his hands shook. 3 weeks passed, and spring bloomed across the city. Quentin adjusted his shifts to part-time. Mara picked up 2 new clients. Zeke brought home a certificate from school with the words "Most Improved Reader" scrawled in glittery marker. One evening, Quentin stood at the bottom of Mara's apartment steps holding a small box in his hands. He stared at her door for a full minute before knocking. When she opened it, she read his expression instantly. "What is it?" "I got the scholarship." Her breath caught. "You did." "I start in June." She stepped out and wrapped her arms around him without a word. He held her tightly, burying his face in the curve of her neck. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You don't have to, just make it count." He pulled back slightly, holding out the box. She opened it slowly. Inside was a key. "To the apartment?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "To everything," he said, "to us." She looked up at him, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then she said, "You're really doing this?" "I am." "And this key is a question." Her heart pounded as she took a step back. "Ask me." He took her hand. "Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to her eyes, but she didn't look away. "Yes, of course, yes." Zeke barreled down the hallway behind her, hair still damp from his bath, and froze when he saw them. "Are you going to be my real mom now?" Mara crouched down, tears still on her cheeks. "If you'll have me." He threw his arms around her so hard, she nearly fell backward. "I was hoping you'd say yes." Quentin laughed, dragging a hand through his hair. They spent the next hour on the couch, Mara's head on Quentin's shoulder, Zeke curled up between them with a blanket and a bowl of popcorn, watching an old movie without really paying attention. 6 weeks later, they stood in a garden behind the courthouse. Friends and neighbors gathered in folding chairs, Zeke front and center with a clip-on tie and a proud grin. Mara wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself in the evenings. Quentin wore the same suit he'd worn to his high school graduation, the sleeves slightly too short, but his posture tall and certain. They exchanged vows under a canopy of string lights and blooming lilacs, Mara's fingers trembling slightly as she slipped the ring onto Quentin's hand. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Zeke covered his eyes and yelled, "Gross," but laughed anyway. They kissed, long and sure, and when they pulled apart, there was nothing uncertain in either of their eyes. They danced in the courtyard afterward, barefoot on the grass, Quentin twirling her with a gentleness that belied the strength in his hands. At one point, Mara whispered, "Why me?" He kissed her temple. "Because you showed up, because you looked at me like I wasn't broken, because you reminded me I was allowed to want something more." She held him tighter. "I love you," she said. "I know," he whispered. "I love you too." Across the lawn, Zeke waved a sparkler in the air, the light tracing golden arcs in the dusk. Quentin watched him, then glanced down at his wife. "Our family," he said. She nodded. "Ours." And they stayed like that together, whole and finally home. The afternoon before Quentin's first day of classes, the apartment was a whirlwind of open binders, half-packed bags, and a very determined 6-year-old organizing pencils into color-coded piles on the coffee table. "You're going to be the oldest student," Zeke announced, holding up a neon green highlighter. "You need this one, it's the best." "I think I'll survive without fluorescent ink," Quentin said, adjusting the strap of his worn backpack. Mara leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching them with a quiet smile. The past few weeks had passed in a blur of wedding paperwork, rearranged schedules, and long nights planning a brand new future. She hadn't seen Quentin this nervous since their ceremony, and even then he'd looked more steady than he did now. "You've got this," she said softly. I haven't written a paper in over a decade, he replied, running a hand over his jaw. What if I choke? You won't. Zeke dropped a handful of markers into the front pocket of the backpack. If you fail, I'll still like you. Quentin glanced down at him. Thanks for the vote of confidence, buddy. Mara walked over, slipping her arms around his waist. You're not going to fail, you're going to surprise yourself. I already did, he murmured. You said yes, didn't you? She rolled her eyes and kissed the corner of his mouth. Don't start getting sentimental. You've got a syllabus to read. That night, after Zeke was tucked in and the apartment had gone quiet, Quentin sat at the kitchen table with a notebook open in front of him. Mara poured 2 mugs of tea and slid into the chair beside him. I forgot how to outline, he admitted. Let me guess, you're trying to structure your entire course load by hand. He gave her a sideways glance. You say that like it's a bad thing. She flipped the notebook around. You're overcomplicating it, start like this. She scribbled quickly, then turned it back. He stared at her handwriting. That's actually helpful. She feigned offense. What, you thought I was just here for my empanadas? I knew you had layers, just didn't realize one of them was academic savior. She nudged his arm with her elbow. There's a lot you don't know about me. I want to know all of it. The look she gave him turned serious. You're allowed to want things now, Quentin, not just for Zeke, for you too. He closed the notebook and rested his hand over hers. It still feels strange, like I'm borrowing someone else's life. It's yours, she said, every part of it. The next morning, Quentin left early while Zeke was still asleep. Mara kissed his cheek, handed him a bagel wrapped in foil, and stood in the doorway watching him walk to the train, his shoulders squared, steps sure. The apartment felt different without him, not empty but expectant. When Zeke woke up, he wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. Is Dad at school? He is. He sat down at the table. Is he going to be gone all day? Just until later this afternoon. Want to make him a surprise dinner? Zeke perked up. Can we make those tiny chicken pies? You're thinking of empanadas. Yeah, but with ketchup. Mara raised an eyebrow. That's a crime against good taste. Dad likes it. She laughed, all right, with ketchup. They spent the day cooking, then built a cardboard sign that read, Welcome home, Student Dad, in crooked red letters. Zeke insisted on hanging it over the doorway with masking tape while Mara set the table. When Quentin walked through the door, backpack slung over one shoulder and hair slightly windblown, he froze. The smell hit him first, then the sign, then Zeke running at full speed to wrap around his legs. What is all this? Celebration dinner, Mara said, stepping out from the kitchen. How was your first day? He looked between them, then dropped his bag and pulled her into his arms. Haven't felt this alive in years. Zeke tugged his sleeve. Did you learn anything? I learned that I'm the oldest person in my class by at least 10 years, and that I can still take notes faster than anyone else. They sat down together, and for the first time in a long time, every piece felt like it was exactly where it should be. Late that night, after Zeke was in bed and the dishes were done, Quentin and Mara stood on the apartment's small balcony. The city below glimmered, soft and distant. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. You know, I used to think the only way to survive was to keep my head down, work hard, and never expect too much. She leaned back against his chest, and now? I've got more than I ever thought I deserved. A son who makes me proud every day. A future I didn't think I'd get. And you. Her voice was quiet. I'm not going anywhere. I know, he turned her toward him. That's what still gets me, you stayed. I didn't stay, she said. I chose you. He kissed her, slow and certain. They stood in silence for a while. the night wrapping around them like a second skin. Inside, a drawing Zeke had left on the fridge fluttered in the breeze from the open window. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a giant rocket ship labeled Our Future. Mara turned her head slightly. "Do you think we'll ever leave the city?" "Maybe one day," he said, "but for now, it's like where we are." "Me too." They stayed out there until the chill crept in, until the lights below dimmed and the world fell quiet. The life they'd built wasn't flashy. It didn't come with penthouses or private jets, but it was full of purpose, of love, of second chances that finally felt like firsts. And that was more than enough, always would be.